things. The loss, I lost a lot of family members and people close to me. I felt really isolated, especially when it first started. And well, at first I took my friend who was watching it over in like China. I thought she's like a hypochondriac. So I thought she was being extra. And so I kind of ignored it. And then when it was over here and we had to stop doing things that we were doing, I felt like this abrupt cut off, like no warning. I just had to stop doing things and do life a different way. So I had this isolation and loss with that, and anxious because I have 2 teenagers and I was like, what am I going to do with them? How do I do this with them? How do I help them? And fatigue. I just felt really exhausted because I was trying to do so many things. I hadn't figured out what things not to do or how to do things better. So I felt quite a few things like right in the beginning and kind of up until summer, I think.
In my like work life is just this a big change of making sure, you know, we're protecting patients. Just the big change of the contact. At home, I would say the big change is just the normalcy that we had is different.
Well, I told you I graduated and I opened an LLC, and I saved all kinds of money. That was nice. I was able to do a lot of things with, you know, in that aspect. So I can't say that it was a bad thing. I feel like some people actually came out a little bit better. Lots of opportunity to reflect. I felt like we had so much time to do, I mean, just stuff like this alone, but a lot of time to do a lot of self-reflection and self-improvement. Just a lot of learning and education. You know, of course, there was this whole, you know, with the moving towards the vaccine, trying to figure out what that was going to look like. And so I did a lot of research and a lot of listening to like a lot of specialists in the field, and more so specific to, you know, people of color specialists. So I guess it gave me an opportunity to do a couple extra things I don't think I would have done otherwise.
Definitely at the beginning it was just like super anxious, super stressed. There were so many unknowns. I think everybody was so on edge. Patients were on edge, doctors, physicians, nurses, everybody. And then as it kind of progressed, I think a lot of people took that anxiety out on each other, which was really hard, I think, for everybody, for nurses and patients alike. So then I think now in the last few months, it has gotten better. I think people, especially with the vaccine coming out, there's been this like bright light at the end of the tunnel, and we're gonna get through this, and we just have to stick together and get through it. And I think everybody hopefully has learned something over the past year, and they hopefully have all come out stronger because of it.
I think the hardest part of work was, especially in this job, I think the hardest part of the work was not having friends and family there to support our patients. A lot of our patients are very dysregulated. Their friends and family typically know them better than we do. Of course, they know them better than we do, and so they are usually very helpful during exams or during times of crisis. And not having friends or family available for our patients was really difficult, especially when it came to like them getting rides to and from the ER, safety planning, things like that. So everything that we typically rely on friends and family to help us figure out for this patient, they weren't able to be there. And so you were the only one figuring all this stuff out with your patient when you really don't fully understand their situation outside of the small context that you're seeing them in. That was really challenging. I mean, we didn't have advocates at the hospital, law enforcement wasn't coming to the hospital, and you as a nurse were just trying to make sure your patient felt supported and cared for, but you were alone. You had no ancillary supports like you usually have. Even our social workers weren't going into the rooms. So it was just us as medical staff, and you talk about a patient that's already alone and isolated, and then don't send any supports in for them, and that's really hard. That was definitely one of the harder things. And then, I mean, the same thing with like all of our patients in the ER. Like, who wants to find out that their parent died in a car accident while they're outside of the ER entrance? And sometimes you were the nurse helping go deliver that news with the physician, and that was really difficult. You know, in the middle of the pandemic, I think people forget that there were other people that were sick. We had cancer patients coming in, we had heart transplant patients coming in, we had people with other diagnoses coming in that their diagnosis had nothing to do with COVID and they were dying, but they still couldn't have a family member at their bedside. That was horrible. It was awful to have a family member, you know, want to see their loved one before they die, and you can't do that for them. And I kind of wonder about the psychological damage and the trauma that we caused in the middle of all of that. I don't know that it was worth it. So that was really hard.
I definitely felt frustrated and at one point hopeless. Like, how am I going to do this, especially being a new nurse? How am I going to learn the things I need to learn on top of learning all these things specifically for COVID? How am I going to take care of my patients? So
just the thought, I have kids, I have a family, my mother-in-law lives with us, but just the thought of, coming here to work and then I go home to them and so frightened that I might be a carrier of it and not showing, and I'm asymptomatic. That I think definitely, but also being burnt, just being overworked. Just the extra stress of it being in the pandemic, and then the influx of patients and
I'm really fortunate that in this work that I get to do, I've met some amazing people who I can count on, I think, as friends. I hope they feel that same way. If they don't, then I don't want them to tell me. But I have some really amazing friends who do what I do, and it makes it a lot easier to be honest about how hard it is to do what I do. But I couldn't not do what I do. I tried to stop even before COVID. I actually stopped for like over a year. I just tried to stop, and I still found myself getting drawn into this population of patients that I have the privilege of working with, or being able to spot those patients that I have the privilege of being able, or survivors, I should say, that I have the privilege of working with. And so this is a part of me, and that showed me I had to learn how to make that not hurt me to do this. But there's times when there's something that I can't get over, and it does make me hypervigilant in some area of my life, I think. And I'm okay because I understand that that's something that happens. So I just try to make sure that I don't keep those things. I talk to the people that I can talk to about it, and I acknowledge it. And then now I think the next step a friend and I have gotten to is, okay, now that we've acknowledged it, what do we do about what we know we need to get done? Like, are we making steps to get somebody professional to help us with some other things? So that's why I appreciate those friendships.
Truthfully, I'm not even gonna lie, I still remember some heavy cases from years ago. I mean, heavy like I don't remember the names. I remember the faces. I remember the stories. How do I handle it? I guess it's just, I attempt to wash it away, kind of like wash my hands clean. I'm not gonna take it home. I'm not gonna really think about it. And it might be a defense mechanism of mine not to remember the names. So how do I handle it? I don't journal about specific cases. I think what I've done in the past and what I've noticed is that sometimes I relate some of the stories to my own stories, and then I have to deal with my own story. And so I think in me handling it is me trying to handle my own issues and trying to make my own issues better and moving past those. So I guess in a way that's not amazing. But at the same time, it allows me to kind of unpack some of my own things by seeing what other people are dealing with and having to unpack.
I think grief would be my word. I think me for sure, and a lot of people as well, at first they, like the stress and the anxiety led to grieving a lot of things. Grieving losing that sense of normalcy in your life. Grieving, for me, it was grieving like not being able to be around my family and my friends and being isolated. Just grieving that time with them. I know a lot of people went through like grieving family members, whether they passed away from COVID or natural causes, and just not being able to be there was really hard. And then like, I mean, even just like grieving like trips that I didn't get to go on, like concerts I didn't get to go to, just that sense of like normalcy. Definitely going through those stages. And I think I have definitely gone through all the stages of grief with that, with the pandemic. Anger, definitely. There was a point where I was just done. I was done going to work every day and coming home and going to work scared and anxious, and then coming home by myself and not being able to be around my people. And then definitely recently have hit the stage of acceptance, and like I said, just making sure that the past year hasn't been in vain, and just learning from it and growing stronger from it.
I think we're probably the most resilient bunch of people you will ever meet. Not just like what we see, you know, out on the floor or in our offices, but like the stories that I hear from my coworkers of like what they've been through in life, or you know, what I've been through, what we go through while we're doing this work. The fact that we all keep showing up, I'm just amazed at how resilient every single one of the nurses I work with is. Yeah, I mean, I have no words for the amount of resiliency that I see in our entire group, myself included. I'm still impressed with myself sometimes. So like, I'm like, wow, Kelly, 3 years in and you're still showing up. And you're still showing up well. That's impressive. You should be impressed with yourself. So I think resiliency is probably the word I would pick.
I would describe forensic nurses as resilient, and just working with like all the wonderful women that I work for, they just bounce back, and I love that.
Forensic nurses are impactful.
Forensic nurses are resilient.
Forensic nurses are extraordinary. Extraordinary.
Forensic nurses are compassionate.
Forensic nurses are resilient.
Forensic nurses are compassionate.
My life, man. I don't know what it is. Huge TV. He was like,
More anxiety.
yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, more anxiety.
Be really quiet in school. And there's a little girl.
How did the pandemic change your life?
Everybody will be so impressed with your camera skills. They're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I only got this camera. I see, nobody will know. Because you got
That was so good.
Yeah, that was easy. I'm like, okay, let's get